it will actually, in my view, deliver greater efficiency from those companies and the way that they operate.
Just back on the minimum wage, do you think that $15 an hour is reasonable?
One day?
Cabinet discuss the election day?
No.
When will you be in a position to know the date for the election? You did it relatively early.
Yeah, well, last time, when you think about it, we had the Rugby World Cup. I was actually quite keen to get the date out there because in reality, if we changed the government prior to the Rugby World Cup, given the significance of that event and all the planning, we would have to have an election quite a long way in front of that. So it was always going to be after that, and given that's the case, it was a fairly limited window. Actually, there's still a limited window in reality. We're not a government that's looking to run to the polls, but equally we're not scared of going there. I don't think there's a massive electoral advantage in me holding that date really close to my chest. Everyone knows we're having an election. We'll know it's in the second half of this year. So I'll name it. It's just I don't need to do that today. So look, I don't know exactly when it'll be well and truly before.
Have you got a lockdown? Have you got the date locked down?
No, I know a few dates that might work, but I haven't got the exact date.
Does it have to be before the G20?
Well, look, that's a complicating factor. It means it's one thing we want to consider.
What's complicating about the G20?
Oh, just attendance. If we had an election exactly around that time, would New Zealand be able to be sure to be represented by the Prime Minister? Because you wouldn't know exactly. Maybe. If it's a complicated election, as your poll showed last night, could be, then that can take quite a lot longer to put together a government. You've always got to wait 2 weeks for the specials before you even start going. It's just not a straightforward process if you don't have a clean outcome.
Could the Prime Minister, i.e. yourself, go to the G20 in the middle of the election campaign? I mean, it's only over Brisbane a couple of days.
Yeah, look, you can do anything you want to do, but I just don't think that's likely.
So you're sort of saying you wouldn't mind getting it sorted out for the G20?
Or after.
Prime Minister, feelings at Waitangi
I think that nails it down roughly, doesn't it?
feelings at Waitangi have run pretty in the past.
Yeah.
Are you anticipating any issues that could cause problems there this year?
In all probability, yes. I mean, it is Waitangi after all, and you always have a group of protesters there who want to make a lot of noise while the camera's on. It's a bit sad, but that's the way it operates. You've got a hikoi going up there, or some sort of protest around deep sea drilling. I think there's another one as well. I think there's a couple of particular events. So I think time roughly coincide with when I go on the marae. So look, it might be really calm and happy families, but I doubt it.
Have they got good reason to protest?
Sorry?
Public security is needs to be taken to ensure safety.
Oh, ask me afterwards and I'll let you know.
Have they got good reason to protest?
Look, people are free to protest if they like, but this is in Waitangi, in Northland, where you've got some of the poorest economic conditions and where mining would provide employment for local people. Personally, I think it would be a great thing in Northland.
Is Titipai Harawira going to take you on to the marae? What's your...
Well, I haven't been advised that she's not going to. She certainly has every other year, so I imagine she will.
Is your preference to use the surpluses after 2014-15 for tax cuts or for debt repayment?
Well, you really asked me to unveil all about election promises or whatever. Look, you should expect us to continue to operate in what I think is a fiscally responsible way for New Zealand. And the Finance Minister's already made it clear that he expects to see debt repayment as an important part of what we do. And that won't be changing. Whether there's room for anything else, you have to come and ask me another day.
You talked about the flag before as a nation building.
Sorry, what was that?
You talked about the flag before as a nation building exercise. I'm wondering, how does that relate to the dynamics around Waitangi Day? Like, what direction do you see nation building going in, and who would that be for? With regards to
well, I mean, I think our National Day is of great significance to New Zealanders, and one of the things that's disappointing about when you see the kind of protests on the day before, it's usually the day before Waitangi Day, is only that it can give people, as in the wide range of New Zealanders who see that, the wrong impression of what actually happens at Waitangi. Because my experience of it is, when I turn up, or when Helen Clark was Prime Minister and she turned up, for the purposes of the cameras, there's lots of protesters. As soon as you guys pack up and go somewhere else, they go home and actually it's a really nice family day at Waitangi. And it's actually usually a nice family day around the rest of New Zealand. Now I think there are lots of New Zealanders who would say, why don't we have that all the time kind of up there. It's not that people shouldn't protest, I'm just saying that's one of the disappointing things that happens there.
How does
True, but it could be-
$14.25, how does $14.25 an hour sound for the minimum wage?
Well, you can pick all sorts of numbers that you like, but I'm not going to announce it today because A, it's not my responsibility to do that, and secondly, we're not ready to do that yet. There'll almost certainly be a movement in minimum wage. I think we've been pretty fair in what we've done in the past, and there probably will be in the future.
Okay,
Can I ask you a
moving
question on the
to
Christchurch
living wage.
rebuild? The government's earmarked, I think, about 1.8 billion for the horizontal infrastructure rebuild. You've capped
That's
it.
through Scourge, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some noises coming out of Christchurch suggesting that may not be enough, that the government may need to contribute more, or else it'll run more slowly than you'd hoped. Have you got any thoughts about that?
Look, there's always lots of discussions happening between the council and Jerry Brownlee. And I'm sure that they'll continue, but that allocation for the horizontal infrastructure was on the best advice that we've had. I haven't seen anything yet from memory from Jerry that says that we won't make it on those on that allocation, but we'll see.
So no proposal has been put to you by the council or any of the other advisors there that it needs to increase?
They're constantly talking.
Necessary? Would you like to stay with the current programme, for instance?
I think we're pretty fully allocated to Christchurch at the moment, so I don't think you'd be wanting to increase that unless there was a really incredibly good case to do so.
Jamie White has previously espoused views about abolishing labour and health and safety laws. He now says he wants those to be Act policy.
Right.
Would you be open to that?
Well, I suspect he's written a lot of stuff. I don't know, but he's been a philosopher and commentator and he's written lots and lots of articles, so I'm sure there's plenty of material out there. Look, in the end, ACT will always have a range of views, as is likely our other coalition partners, that either we don't agree with or we don't intend to implement. I don't know what he'll specifically argue for if they get anywhere near being in government, but in principle, I reckon the labour law settings we have in New Zealand are about right. And when it comes to health and safety, actually there's room for improvement, particularly in certain industries like forestry, and that's why WorkSafe New Zealand, and in fact the government has been commissioning a lot of work in that area. So exactly by, what issues he's saying, I don't know how relevant they are. I also saw him on Breakfast TV saying he had some personal views on drugs, which are not going to be the party's policy, so you'd have to ask him.
What's the point of giving these parties like ACT and United Future electoral deals or support when they're on zero? Like explain to New Zealand.
Well, there might be none if they're on zero, but I think it's really important that we all understand that one political poll does not mean an election result. I mean, in the end, polls are polls. They're a snapshot of 1,000 people. I might at the margins agree or disagree, and I'm not saying I disagree, I'm just simply saying that come an election, people are going to go out and vote. And you see all those results, then I can tell you what the makeup of the government's going to look like. But, we'll see how it all pans out. A lot can change between now and election day.
Yeah, I guess
But
the
the polls
point
are
is
good.
this. The point is this. Why, explain to the average New Zealander why you're prepared to accommodate parties that, regardless of the poll results, are essentially flatline, barely alive, couldn't win anything without you.
Okay, that's a really good question, and put it to me, 2 or 3 weeks before an election, I'll give you the answer, because I'll have a much clearer idea of what their polling is like. But if today I can't tell you exactly what it's like, I can tell you what it's like on the Reed Research 3 News poll for last week, but we're not having an election in 3 weeks' time.
So is that the sort of timing you're thinking of about, when your decisions on accommodations are going to be that close to the election?
Relatively close, yeah.
But how worried are you, because consistently those parties have actually been polling at zilch. So I mean, just how worried are you that, your, support parties are doing so badly, which...
Yeah, typically I will say one thing, we always find even with